much, everyone, for being here in this wonderful place, Conway Hall. I was saying to our friends before we came on the platform, I wasn't going to say this, but I've decided I will anyway. I owe my life to this building. Because at a rally here, in this very room, before the Second World War, in support of the Spanish Republic, my dad sat there, my mum sat there, and their eyes met across the aisle. And the rest, as they say, is history. This is an amazing gathering, and I want to say a big thank you to Matt and Sian and everyone that's put so much work into putting on this Arise event. Because these things don't happen by accident, and having the place and space to come together in workshop groups, debate, discussion, and bigger events like this is absolutely essential to educating ourselves as to our strengths within our movement and gathering and developing those ideas that are going to take us forward as a party, as a movement, and into government. If we lose that ability and that opportunity to talk to and listen to each other, then we become remote from the people we're trying to work with and serve, and we become distant from the very notion that it's not a series of MPs that we're going to be electing into government whenever a general election comes. It's a movement that moves into power. That is important to understand. It's about all of us taking responsibility for the programme that we are putting forward to fight a general election campaign on. And it's a real privilege to be alongside such great comrades on the platform here. The work that Dan does in his constituency and the support he has there, and the work that he does on international development. The work that Richard does as the Shadow Justice Secretary, and the way in which that he challenges all the norms about justice, about rehabilitation of offenders, and the causes of crime in our society. And the way in which Bell campaigns, and the way in which Bell makes sure that Diana and the team are fully across the whole Home Office brief and the problems we're going to face in government on it, but the need to bring a completely different agenda, and challenging on Windrush, challenging on the hostile environment, and speaking out about immigration detention. Thank you, Belle, for everything that you do in that area. Emma Dent-Code, as the MP for Kensington, nobody ever thought would be elected. She was elected. Why? Because she's totally rooted within that community. You've only got to walk around the area around Grenfell with her, and you see the way in which she's totally rooted in that community. Any MP that had been a member for decades, faced with the crisis of Grenfell, as she was in 2017, quite honestly, would have struggled. A major fire, a huge disaster, and a local authority whose incompetence seems to know no bounds, was left with trying to bring it all together and bring about justice for the people of Grenfell. Emma took it on, having been elected only a week or so before. Thank you, Emma, for all you've done standing up for the people. But you know, what we're saying about justice in our society, what we're saying about social justice in our society, is something that resonates very, very widely indeed. It's not just in this room, it's not just people that are very active in the unions and the Labour Party. It extends very wide indeed. This morning I was at a rally called by the education campaigners about properly funding our schools. They were interested in the ideas we have for a national education service, and pointing out that it's their campaigning that will stop this Tory government's continuing cuts in education. Their support for what we're saying was absolutely huge. And as a very proud member of the party and constituency MP for my area in Islington North, I've just been to an event in my constituency. It's called Soul in the City on the Andover estate. And you might say, what am I doing at Soul in the City? It was absolutely brilliant. There were hundreds and hundreds of people there, put on and inspired by local church, people of all faiths and none, having a fantastic time and feeling empowered by coming together in that sense of community. Which is why I'm so proud of one of the things we've achieved in the party since 2015 is to develop the principle that our party staff should be focused on organising within the community and campaigns within the community, which is why we've employed a good number now of community organisers in order to bring people together and empower communities to defend their schools, defend their hospitals, but above all, give that creative space that can bring about the ideas for the future, on the jobs for the future, the investment for the future, the quality of housing for the future. It is about mobilising our movement and empowering people who've been told for too long that the experts know best, they know nothing. I tell you, the best experts on housing and homelessness are those that are sleeping rough and need somewhere to live. Understand those issues. The challenge we faced in 2015 when I was nominated to be the leader of the party was that we had inherited a banking crisis. That banking crisis led to austerity. That led to a budget in 2010 by the Tories and the Liberal Democrats. Not forget that. Slashed the DWP budget, which introduced austerity, which froze benefits, and which has damaged every area of public spending ever since, and led to an enormous growth of inequality within our society. As a party, we weren't strong enough in opposing it. As a party, we appeared to be wanting to manage the crisis rather than address the crisis and use it as an opportunity to transform, reconfigure and reconstruct our economy. We put, all of us in this room, put the whole concept there of opposing austerity to the members of our party, supporters of the party and members of the union, and we won that leadership. There was a challenge, as you know, a year later, and we won it again by an even bigger majority. Because people could see that the only way forward for this party, the only way forward is to say it is morally wrong in the 5th richest country in the world to have so many people living in desperate poverty, when 1 million have to use food banks every year, when so many children are going to school hungry, when thousands are sleeping on our streets, when head teachers have to collect money in order to maintain a school, when local authorities year on year are seeing their money slashed and their services cut as a result. Yet at the same time, we've had now 9 years of a government that systematically has been reconfiguring tax in favour of the wealthiest and the best off. So the injustice, the inequality, the gap has got wider and wider and wider year on year. Bernie Sanders once put it very well in a speech he made in the United States. And I remember listening to it and thinking that just puts it so well. He said, America's a great country. America's a very powerful country. America can do anything. We can put people on the moon. We can invade here. We can go there. We can do this. We can achieve anything. But there's something we cannot afford. We cannot afford the injustice and the inequality of the wealthy that mean that 40 million Americans get no health care because of a taxation system that benefits the very richest. We have a government in this country that's doing exactly the same. So I won't be spending an awful lot of time watching the Tory leadership debates. I've got better things to do with my time. What I'm going to spend my summer doing is travelling all around this country. Travelling around this country, campaigning and getting ready for the day in which we take them on in an election campaign. Because it's not just in this country that this challenge is taking place to the idea of the elite running society. Look at the growth of the left in the United States. Who would have thought that somebody labelled themselves as a socialist would come within a whisker of winning the Democratic nomination a few years ago. Who would have thought that the most influential political figures in the USA now are those that are on the radical left of politics in the Congress and the Senate and in campaigns across the whole country? The world has changed. The world has changed because people have realised you cannot go on with these levels of inequality and call it civilization. And those parties across Europe that have campaigned against austerity have had greater support. Those that have sought to manage austerity have not. There's a pretty clear message here about the direction in which our party must go and continue to go, that we're the party of transformation of the economy and transformation of the economic chances of people within our society. So I'm proud of what we achieved in changing that, and the way in which John McDonnell, Peter Dowd and Becky Long-Bailey have taken that message to communities all over the country, where we've had these town and city and regional and county conferences looking at the economic opportunities and what we can do to change things across the whole of the UK. And that is what will mobilise people and mobilise us to win a general election. A national investment bank that will invest fairly across the whole country, regional transformation funds that will invest in frontier technology and new jobs, an economy that will be working for all, not for the benefit of the very few. But it's also recognising that there is an emergency across the whole planet, and that is the climate emergency. You can't run away from it, you can't ignore it, you can't wish it away. It's there, it's happening. We cannot go on destroying the natural world, destroying biodiversity, destroying the ecosystem at the rate we are and not all pay a price. You cannot wish it away. You have to do something about it. It means sustainability, it means changes in energy generation, it means an awful lot of things. And it means a new industrial revolution, a green industrial revolution. And that does not have to be a threat to everyone across the country. I don't go knocking on doors in my constituency, look people in the eye and blame them for the climate emergency. They are not the ones that caused it. They are the ones who are suffering it. And when I speak to families living alongside major roads, it's their children who are paying the price through loss of lung capacity because of the polluted air they're breathing in from traffic happening all across this country. And so I was proud to put, on behalf of the party, a motion to Parliament on May the 1st, on May Day, saying that we would be the first Parliament in the world to declare a climate emergency if the House of Commons agreed it that afternoon. Michael Gove spoke at great length. He managed to spend most of the speech attacking me for things I hadn't done, hadn't said, places I hadn't been to, and things I'd never even thought of. But he's a man of much imagination, so he must be allowed free rein to his imagination. And I'm frankly not bothered. I haven't got the time, the energy, or the space to answer this kind of nonsense. I'm more interested in dealing with the politics of the situation. And our motion was carried. And in that, we are demanding of the government that within 6 months they come back with a plan for each government department, and I put the same demands on every member of the shadow cabinet. So over this summer, we take it out there, take it out on a campaign about the green energy jobs we can develop, about the new industries we can develop, about the sustainable environment that we have to create in order to help others create the same around the world. It's a key central issue, but it's also a class issue. It's a class issue that the poorest people eat the worst quality food, breathe the foulest air, and live in the worst quality housing conditions. Conquering injustice, building good quality homes, building the council housing that is decent and secure for the future, helps to deal with the climate and environmental crisis, but also deals with the issues of social injustice within our society. It's a Labour government that I'm determined to lead that will deliver that programme in government. There's so much else I could talk about. I just want to mention a couple of other areas of policy that we have changed and put forward. Crucially, it's about education and the way in which young people are treated and the aspirations that they have. When I was leaving school, I had the opportunity, had I taken it, to go to university for free and get no debt whatsoever, move on with the rest of your life. That was taken away by succeeding generations. And at the other end of the scale, nursery provision is increasingly expensive or difficult to get hold of. Underfunding of schools means the moral pressure that's put on parents and families to pay into collections to keep the schools going calls into question the freedom those schools have. And so we've reached a situation where our education is over-competitive, underfunded, and increasingly dominated by academy chains that are unaccountable either to local authorities or to central government, and free schools that are anything but free. And so, after a lot of discussion and thought, our policy proposal that we'll put to the people in a general election is of a national education service that will have a fundamental principle at its heart. The post-war Labour government's fundamental principle was healthcare should be a human right free at the point of need. Education should be a human right free at the point of learning for everybody throughout their lives. At its very core, for the very earliest years, those children getting access to nursery places, those very small pre-nursery age babies, families getting the support that they need. Because as of today, you can go up the road to UCH Hospital, look at the babies being born, look at the postcode where they come from, and you could work it out which of them's going to end up in which university, which profession they might end up with, what their life chances would be, because of the economic position of where they're born and their families. That is immoral and wrong. Yes. We have to change it. We have to invest in the needs of every child throughout the country and reduce that level of competition and unleash the creativity that's there within children. So we'll be looking at giving real parity of esteem to apprenticeships and academic education. We'll also be looking at the curriculum in primary schools by giving more money for music and art education, because I think it's very important. And also looking at the way in which history and empowerment develop from schools. Education should be the time when the imagination is opened, not you're driven down by false competitions between schools and told to give up subjects because it looks like you won't get the grades that'll keep your school in the right place in the league table. So, those are just some of the things that we want to do in government. The social justice of ending universal credit systems and so many other things that we are utterly determined to do. But, as Dan pointed out, it's what we do in the rest of the world that's also very, very important. How we deal with Europe in the future, with Brexit. We will block a no-deal exit, which leads us into a trade deal with Trump and all the damage that it will do to our economy and our society. Because what we're faced with is a direction that Johnson and Hunt want to take us into, which is about deregulation, which is about investor protection, which is about the damage it would do to our environment, our living standards, and above all, our consumer standards as well. But it's also what we do on the wider world stage. I stand up and criticize any country in the world, whoever they are, where there are human rights abuses taking place. I think it's our duty to do that. I want the cornerstone of our international policy as a Labour government to be peace, to be justice, and to be human rights around the world. There is no peace that's going going to come by an attack on Iran by Trump or anybody else. It will just unleash the dogs of war as they were unleashed in Afghanistan, as they were unleashed in Iraq. And sadly, I can hear myself saying it, February the 15th, 2003, in Hyde Park, when more than 1 million of us were there, opposing, sadly unsuccessfully, the Iraq war. What we said was, this war will have incalculable consequences. It will unleash the terrorists of the future. It will create the refugees of the future. It will create the misery and mayhem of the future. Anyone who's seen people trying to eke out an existence in refugee camps in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Libya, or on mainland Europe itself will realise they themselves are the victims of those wars. There's got to be a different and better way of doing things. And we will not be a government that will be in hock to Trump or any other US administration that wants to take us to war. We will be the voice for diplomacy, for reason, for peace, but above all, to also speak up for those people in any society, be it Saudi Arabia, be it Iraq, be it Iran, or anywhere else that are suffering human rights abuses. Because surely, if we enjoy the right of free speech, we would expect that for everybody else around the world. And so our voice will be there for all of that. But it's also how we act as a movement and as a party. We're faced with a Tory leadership contest between two people who fundamentally have the same lack of vision for anything. Boris Johnson, however, is different to Jeremy Hunt, fundamentally very different. Boris Johnson is a man of very deep belief, a belief in the self-advancement of Boris Johnson. And they will conclude their election. One of them will become Prime Minister. It's up to us then to be ready for a general election. We have had a lot of attacks on individuals in the party and on the party itself by very rich and very powerful interests, as Richard and Dan have pointed out. Those rich and powerful interests have not gone away, and they'll be very busy in the run-up to and during the election campaign. Across Europe, there's a rise in the far right, there's a rise in racism. Anti-Semitism becoming the norm in Poland, in Hungary, and other countries. Islamophobia becoming the norm in many other countries. Far-right racism of all sorts on the rise everywhere. Seeking to exploit poverty, injustice, austerity, lack of investment, and left-behind communities. Racism is easy to unleash, and it can create an atmosphere of the most unbelievable hate. Look at the history of the rise of the Nazis in Germany in the 1920s and 1930s, when all the privations of the Weimar Republic were heaped upon the Jewish community. Look at the way in which it's now heaped upon the Muslim communities across Europe. It's the same old story of the racists and what they do. We as a movement, as a people, as a party, will never tolerate racism in any form whatsoever, be it anti-Semitism, be it Islamophobia, be it any other form of racism. Because we know the importance of bringing people. We know the importance of bringing people and communities together. So when we go out on the campaign trail, we will point to what our policies are. We will unite people and communities, and we'll use social media, we'll use all the electronic forms we can, we will use, as far as we're able to, get a voice through the mainstream media, and in the last election campaign, once the TV rules kicked in on equal time on broadcasting, our support increased very, very rapidly, as you remember. And we will use the other method, the one that always works. People out in communities, on the streets, on the buses, in the cafes, talking to other people about their lives, about politics, giving people that sense of empowerment. Think of the history of our movement. Think of how trade unions were founded. Think of what those people went through in the 17th and 18th and 19th centuries to try to form trade unions, those that campaigned for free education, those that campaigned for a national insurance system to bring about pensions, those that campaigned for the right to vote, the right for women to vote, the right to be housed. All those things never came about because somebody once had a great idea and thought, I'll put that to the Commons tomorrow, I'm sure they'll agree. It doesn't work like that. Politics works when people mobilise together with a common endeavour to achieve that decent society of socialist values and the justice that goes with it. And we'll be attacked, I'm sure, I don't doubt that. But that strength of our movement working together on the principles on which we all agree is something that can succeed, and I believe will take us to a general election that we can win. So this summer, don't sit back. This summer, out there on the campaign trail, out there on housing, on health, on education, on social justice, on rights of minorities, in opposing the rise of racism. But above all, to give people and ourselves the confidence that we can and will win and will deliver the social transformation that people have met in this hall ever since this wonderful place was built, to support those in difficulty, support those in struggle, and themselves be empowered by it. I'm proud to lead this party, proud of the policy changes we've achieved, but desperate for the chance to win an election to deliver for the people. Thank you.